Psalm chapter 3, verses 5 through 8. Who's in charge? The greatest temptation? To be in charge. Who's in charge? God is. Psalms is considered a section of the Bible's wisdom literature, with this passage inviting us to submit to God's authority in reverence, with joy, and without fear. Verse 6 helps us understand that overzealous egos or self-proclaiming mantras are misleading. Only you are in charge of you, or you know what is right for you. Neither is true. Only God knows anything for sure. Only God knows what is right for you and me. Only God is the one fully in charge. There are several types of psalms: praise, laments, trust, prophetic psalms, and others. Psalm 3 is considered a royal psalm or messianic psalm. It celebrates the sovereignty and kingship of God through Jesus Christ. It is the declaration of the Messiah King as God's Son, the fulfillment of God's promise. It was November 17th, 1793, unprecedented in history, and at the height of the French Revolution, they stormed the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, deposed the Christian God, enthroned the goddess Reason, abolished the Christian calendar, established a new government based on ideological atheism. Atheism means no God. The French revolutionary calendar didn't survive, but political atheism did. A century later, it took root through Marxist communism, eventually engulfing more than a third of the world's population. Under the guise of secular humanism, atheism has become the operative principle of most Western nations, including, and sadly enough, America. With atheism, God is replaced by one's own reason, tempting the best of us to break the first commandment of having no other gods than God. The greatest temptation of all is to be a God unto myself. I am in charge, or the God of my family. I am in charge, the God of my company. I am in charge, the God of my future. Psalm 3 helps us understand what it means to answer this question of who is in charge? Jesus Christ. Psalm 3, written by David, reveals human nature rebelling against God through persecution of others who don't reason as I do. There are many 21st century persecutions. We see the first great persecutions of Roman Christians during Nero's reign in AD 64. Those rebelling against God are directly saying, I'm in charge. But these persecutions don't compare to the fury unleashed against the church by the Soviet communists in the last century. They shot tens of thousands of pastors, priests, and believers in the first revolutionary wave, then sent millions more to die in Siberian prison camps. They shut down churches, burned Bibles, banned religious instruction for children, made it illegal to pray even in one's home, closed monasteries, and shuttered seminaries. A number of Russians who were shot or starved to death by their own government during World War II was 3 times greater than the number of Russians who died at the hands of the Nazis. Raging nations violently destroyed more people in the 20th century than in all wars and previous recorded in human history. Years ago, as a young university administrator, I and several other leaders visited the former Soviet Union following President Reagan's famous 1987 "Tear Down This Wall" speech. As we traveled these former Soviet Union cities, we witnessed numerous churches, once vibrant for God, now warehouses plundered by those who broke the first commandment. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Nobel Prize-winning Russian author, recalled as a child hearing adults say about disastrous events that had begun to plague Russia with the rise of communism, quote, "Men have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened," unquote. Friedrich Nietzsche and his "God is dead" mantra is enshrined at the University of Berkeley, California, spawning America's peace and sexual revolution and flaunting, "I am in charge. There is no God of the Bible." This Psalm 3 declaration of the Messiah King as God's Son is the only way out of who's in charge. Jesus is the answer to this question. Who's in charge? Jesus, the Messiah King, who is the opening of the Gospel of Mark chapter 1, verse 1. This Jesus was established by God the Father, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 5. Jesus was announced by God as the baptism of Jesus in Mark chapter 1, verse 11. And at the transfiguration in Peter chapter 1, verse 17. And then Romans 1:4 discloses the Messiah King as God's Son in the meaning of the resurrection. So who's in charge of your life? The Messiah King, God's Son, Jesus.